Welcome to Future Epoch, where we learn more about our world. At the start of 2009, Research in Motion was one of the most valuable technology companies on the planet. Its share price had climbed above $140. Its devices were carried by presidents, prime ministers, and the most powerful executives in the world. Approximately 77 million users worldwide were sending billions of messages a month on a network so addictive that people had taken to calling the device a BlackBerry. The company controlled roughly 20% of the global smartphone market, and its co-CEOs showed no signs of slowing down. 7 years later, BlackBerry announced it would stop making phones entirely. What happened inside those 7 years is one of the most studied corporate collapses in the history of technology. A story not of a company that was destroyed by its competitors, but of a company that refused to believe its competitors existed. Research in Motion was founded in 1984 in Waterloo, Ontario, by Mike Lazaridis and Douglas Freegan. Lazaridis was a visionary engineer with an almost religious belief in the value of efficient wireless data transmission. Jim Balsillie joined as co-CEO in 1992, bringing aggressive commercial ambition to Lazaridis' technical instincts. The company spent its early years building wireless data systems and pages before launching its first email-capable device in 1999. The BlackBerry was not simply a phone. It was a portable email terminal, engineered for the corporate world, built on a proprietary network that could push messages to a device with exceptional speed and remarkable battery efficiency. In an era when receiving email on the move was a luxury reserved for the wealthiest executives, BlackBerry made wireless communication feel indispensable. For the enterprise market, it did not just become popular. It became infrastructure. Through the early 2000s, BlackBerry's growth was relentless. Government agencies, financial institutions, and law firms standardized on the platform because of its security architecture, which encrypted messages through RIM's own proprietary servers. When Barack Obama entered the White House in 2009 and publicly insisted on keeping his BlackBerry despite security concerns from his own staff, it became international news. The device had evolved into a status symbol as much as a productivity tool. By 2007, BlackBerry was deeply embedded in the culture of global business, and RIM's market capitalization had climbed into the tens of billions of dollars. Lazaridis and Balsillie were celebrated as the architects of the mobile communication revolution. Then, in January 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and introduced the iPhone. The reaction inside RIM was not alarm. It was dismissal. Lazaridis later recalled that his immediate assessment was that Apple had built a reasonable internet device, but that its battery life was impractical and the mobile network simply could not handle the bandwidth demands of a full touchscreen interface. Balsillie was reportedly similarly skeptical, characterizing the iPhone as an appealing consumer product that would not compete meaningfully in the enterprise world where BlackBerry held its strongest position. What neither man fully grasped was that the distinction between consumer technology and enterprise technology was about to collapse entirely. The central failure of Research in Motion was not a failure of engineering. It was a failure of perception. BlackBerry's entire competitive identity rested on the efficiency of its proprietary data network. Every feature the company had built, the physical keyboard, the compressed email protocol, the server-side message handling, was designed to extract maximum utility from minimal bandwidth. That constraint had shaped the company's engineering culture so thoroughly that it had become an invisible assumption baked into every strategic decision. When Apple arrived with a device that consumed data freely and prioritized experience over efficiency, RIM's leadership saw a flawed product built on an unsustainable premise. What they failed to see was that mobile networks were improving so rapidly that bandwidth limitations would soon become irrelevant. The iPhone was not competing on the same terms as BlackBerry. It was rewriting the terms entirely. Google launched Android in 2008, giving device manufacturers worldwide access to an open, rapidly improving platform. Within 2 years, a wave of capable touchscreen smartphones was reaching consumers at every price point, and those consumers were buying them in numbers that stunned the industry. The App Store model created an ecosystem of software and services that BlackBerry had no equivalent of. RIM's own developer platform was fragmented, technically demanding, and comparatively neglected. The co-CEO structure that had appeared to be a strength, two complementary leaders balancing engineering vision and commercial strategy, began to function as a weakness. Lazaridis and Balsillie frequently disagreed on direction, and significant decisions moved slowly through an organization simultaneously trying to defend an existing business and construct a credible response to a structural shift in its market. Reports from inside the company later suggested that multiple senior executives raised concerns about the competitive threat from Apple and Android during this period, and that those concerns were consistently minimized at the leadership level. RIM's public response was incremental. New BlackBerry models arrived with improved screens and better browsers, but the underlying platform remained essentially the same. The company continued to bet that enterprise customers would not abandon BlackBerry's security credentials for consumer devices that their IT departments had not validated. That bet proved catastrophically wrong. The numbers were unambiguous. In 2009, BlackBerry commanded approximately 20% of the global smartphone market. By 2012, that figure had collapsed to less than 5%. Research in Motion reported its first operating loss in a decade during that same year, and its share price, which had peaked above $140, fell below $10 within a few years. Thorsten Heinz replaced Mike Lazaridis as sole CEO in January 2012, promising a turnaround built around a new operating system called BlackBerry 10. The company formally renamed itself BlackBerry Limited in early 2013, retiring the Research in Motion name in a signal of intended transformation. BB10 launched in January 2013, and by several accounts it was a technically capable system, but it arrived years after the window had closed. Developers had already committed their resources to iOS and Android. Without a competitive app ecosystem, BlackBerry 10 could attract neither consumers nor the enterprise users who had come to expect access to the same applications on their work devices as on their personal ones. An attempted takeover by Fairfax Financial in 2013 collapsed before completion, underlining the uncertainty surrounding the company's future. John Chen took over as CEO in late 2013 and pursued a sharply more pragmatic course, cutting costs, narrowing focus to enterprise software and cybersecurity services, and eventually licensing the BlackBerry brand to third-party manufacturers for hardware production. In September 2016, BlackBerry confirmed it would exit the hardware business entirely. The devices that had defined a generation of professional communication were discontinued. BlackBerry's decline is taught in business schools not because the company was poorly managed in any conventional sense, but because it was so well managed within its own frame of reference that it could not perceive the world outside of it. Lazaridis and Balsillie were not incompetent leaders. They built one of the most successful technology businesses of the 1990s and early 2000s, using a coherent engineering philosophy and a sophisticated understanding of enterprise needs. The same discipline and certainty that made them successful also made them inflexible, and that inflexibility closed the company off to the possibility that its market was undergoing a structural transformation rather than a temporary disruption. The lesson is not that companies should panic at every new competitor or abandon their strengths at the first sign of turbulence. It is that the assumptions embedded most deeply within a successful business model are also the hardest to examine and the most dangerous when they turn out to be wrong. Research in Motion assumed that bandwidth constraints would persist, that enterprise and consumer markets would remain distinct, and that security credentials would consistently outweigh user experience. Every one of those assumptions proved false within a decade. Today, BlackBerry Limited survives as a software and cybersecurity company, a business that would be almost unrecognizable to the executives who ran it during its peak years. Its products protect critical infrastructure, government communications networks, and the software systems embedded in connected vehicles. By some measures, the company has found a genuine second life in a narrow but defensible market. But the smartphone that defined how an entire generation of professionals worked, communicated, and organized their lives is gone. The physical keyboards, the compressed data network, the end-to-end encrypted email architecture, all of it dismantled, not by a single catastrophic failure of technology, but by the steady incremental cost of certainty held too long by leaders who had every reason to trust their instincts. The question BlackBerry leaves open is one that applies to every dominant technology company operating today. When the source of your competitive strength is also the source of your deepest assumption about how the world works, how do you know when the world has already moved on? Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this content and want to see more, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel.